Hello and Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome to our podcast Diving Deep. And this time we are joined by an amazing author of one of my favorite book series called the Sufi Comics, and he's none other than Muhammad Ali Vakil. I believe that you had done some work with your brother Muhammad Arif Vakil as well. But I think main person heading this project is Mr. Mohammed Ali Vakil, who has joined us today. He's taken out his some time for us from his busy schedule, and I'm very excited to show you that they have done so many books over the years, starting in 2011. I was super intrigued because being an artist, any message which is presented with a good visual is so much more effective than just speaking or writing. And Sufi Lines happens to be their latest book, which I just have on my iPad for now on the Kindle. So without further ado, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
The pleasure and honor is ours. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome you and thank you on behalf of all the readers for giving to the world these gorgeous books, which are so beautifully rendered and simplified. And I think that that is the greatest gift. They say if you've understood the message, then you can simplify it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, um, a lot of these stories that I've illustrated in the form of comics, and then also the other books I've worked with other artists as well. Um, and I learned these stories while I was growing up, and as the teachers that were narrating these stories, I always had this movie playing in my head about how the characters were talking to each other, what was happening. But the presentation was always either in text form, which I had to read, or someone narrating it to me. Um, so I think I always had this desire to kind of see what it would be like if it was in visuals. Or obviously, many of these stories happened many years ago, but just trying to come one step closer to what it would look like and be there.
So tell us, yes, absolutely. I really resonate with that because I was never a reading person. I actually started reading books in grade 9 when I had to take an exam and there was no other way. But before that, I would only look for pictures in books. So I think that visual impact is so beautiful. And thank you for doing this for us because we all had those movies playing. It's just that you were able to translate it into something tangible. So tell us about Sufism, how you got interested in Sufism, or why have you called your comics Sufi comics? You know, somebody could have thought of naming them Islamic comics or stories from the lives of the Prophet or whatever, but you've named them beautifully Sufi comics. That's my first question. And perhaps tying into this is the second question about the title of your work, comics. Why comics?
Yeah, I get that question often. Why Sufi comics? Or why did we call it Sufi comics? Um, a couple of reasons. One, I think uh, I had really good teachers in the sense I had teachers who, and just like I grew up in Dubai, and just like a lot of other kids in the community who were growing up with me, the morning we'd go to school, and in the evening we'd go to a madrasa, and we'd be taught lessons from Islamic history and tradition. But I was very fortunate to have teachers who would not just stop at just teaching history. They were really like role models for us, and they were very spiritual. They would go deeper into the meanings of the stories, the historical personalities of the Quran. And I got that sort of environment where there was a focus on the inner dimension of Islam. And that was, I think, a seed that my teachers have planted, my parents, my grandparents have planted in me. Uh, And that was always something that resonated with me about the Islamic faith. It wasn't just, okay, I do my rituals and I'm a good Muslim. It's there's so much more to it. There's so much more richness and depth to it. Um, so that was sort of my background, and I moved to India in 2002, and that for me was also a very interesting experience because India is actually a very deeply spiritual country from a lot of other countries that I've been to, and people over here take their faith seriously. Um, and I had this desire to connect with people of other faiths in India because I came in 2002, so you could also imagine there's a lot of misunderstanding about what is Islam, what does it teach, what does it the Quran say, um, and I just kind of felt that um, what's a good way? I took my faith seriously, and I said, what is a good way for me to connect with people of other faiths as well? So there were, a couple of things happening parallelly. One is me exploring my own spirituality and developing that. Second, coming to India and trying to connect with people of other faiths. Um, and for me, Sufism represented the study of the inner dimension of Islam. Beyond the rituals, what do they actually mean? What do they signify? What is the ultimate purpose of life, and how do we purify our soul? So it became very natural for me to call it Sufi comics because it kind of uh, brought together what I was trying to do with this project. So that's a part of Sufi. But now the second, why comics?
Yes.
Um, Comics because I grew up reading a lot of comics. I think that's one big reason. Um, so I think if I go back, Tintin, Asterix, there's a series in India called Amar Chitrakatha, where I learned a lot about Indian history, mythology, the kings and queens of India from those comics. So it was very clear to me that this is not just a entertainment medium; it can be a very serious educational medium as well. Um, and it's not just for kids because I can see that as an adult I can benefit from it. And at the time when I started, I think I started Sufi Comics sometime in 2009, and I published the first book in 2011. And that's the time also when Facebook was getting popular. I realized that people are becoming more visual in consuming information. So then I thought, and I was also learning art at that time. So again, a lot of things came together. And I said, I'm developing the skill and I want to use it in a useful way. And then the other reason why I'm calling it Sufi comics is that all these thoughts were coming together, and I think that's how Sufi comics came into existence.
Amazing. So that's how Sufi Comics was born out of all these deep deliberations. And it's very obvious because you are touching on a subject which is generally sensitive. Religion is a sensitive subject. And to be able to present it with this ease and beauty, I think it's remarkable. And I'm really impressed with this idea of India being a very spiritual country because um, I think of Eat, Pray, Love when I think of India, and I think of, going deep within yourselves and asking deeper questions. So I was going through your latest book, Sufi Lines. I haven't gone too far, but just the introduction is so beautiful, um, where you've asked us to think. Why should we be reflecting about who we are and all these deeper questions when the world is suffering with so many tangible problems? And thinking about spiritual reflection feels like a luxury that we perhaps can't afford. And then you go on and you talk about how it's as if we have the answers, but we're not willing to put them to practice, much like we've got the password, but we've got it in our pocket. The password is there, and we're not putting it in. The password is not being put into the computer for us to unlock solutions to our problems. You've given that metaphor. And then what is beautiful is that you go on and you talk about the idea of reflection. Could you please shed some light on this idea and how you've connected to the idea of having our passwords in our pocket?
Yeah. Um, you know, it was, I think, during COVID, a lot of things changed for me at multiple levels, personally and also professionally. Um, and I think maybe I would say before COVID, uh, I had this tendency, uh, uh, I guess, a greater tendency to focus on the external. Even though I was writing Sufi comics at that time, but I would say on a scale, I was still, at least in that period of time, I was a lot focused on the external in terms of, both judging myself and also just generally understanding the world, that whether it's success, whether it's having impact in the world, the more, for example, let's say Sufi comics, that means the more of Sufi comics I sell, therefore, the better I'm doing, the more God will be happy, and the better I'm doing good for my soul. Sort of connecting external impact uh, to what is good. And I think something about my experience with COVID and all changed that for me. And I just saw that the flaw in that whole thinking. Um, and it became more clear to me that what really matters is the quality of your intention. I think that in the end of the day, that's all that matters. And we do not, we think, because we live in this three-dimensional external world, we think causality is, okay, I do something good and that will connect with someone else, and then that creates a chain reaction. But reality is much more multi-dimensional than the three-dimensional world, and we do not know the kind of causality that God works. Um, and in the end of the day, I think what really ultimately matters is the quality of intention you bring to your actions. And that, again, that sort of realization came to me through reading and reflection. And it just changed the way I sort of look at the world and how I approach my work. And that was also the thinking behind when I was writing that introduction, that, you know, if I was still in my old way of thinking, I would be focusing all my attention on, okay, if I want to do good, I need to have maximum external impact in the world, which would then just lead to a cycle of, frustration or just getting more busy. But if my internal state still remains the same, have I really progressed in any way, or I have just moved parts of this world from one way to the other? No real change. Mm. So yeah, so then I think it was that thinking behind that made me write that introduction, and also a lot of the chapters subsequent to that in the book.
Thank you so much. That's very deep. I think COVID came as a blessing for a lot of us, where I think the tagline for COVID from COVID for me was, if you can't go out, go within. And I think for me, that's what COVID became, a moment for everyone to go within. And I think a lot of our hidden issues that have been, already been shoved under the carpet, they started to emerge because we were all home. And in, human interaction with your same family members all the time kind of brought out that urgency to work on ourselves, and figuring out how we can polish our characters. While you were talking, it also reminded me of Rumi's saying, where he says, "Yesterday I was clever and I wanted to change the world. Today I'm wise and I want to change myself." Have you included this particular one in any of your books?
I have mentioned it as a quote in, I think, the first book. I think since Rumi has the two volumes, I think it's in the first volume where
So these are
some pages.
your two books that you've done on Rumi. And this
Yeah,
is your first one, and this is the second one. Guys, please check out these gorgeous books. I was just completely in awe when I opened these books, and these comics had this beautiful feel of old manuscripts infused into the artwork. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Yes, please go on.
yeah, um, yeah. I think one of the things that I was thinking about when working on these books I think the thought started with the second book. If you notice, the art of the first book and the second book is completely different.
Yes.
Um, and I realized that the art in itself carries a message. It's not just the words or the dialogues. Right? The art in itself gives the feeling and creates an ambience for the reader through which, you know, based on that ambience, it kind of they receive a message. So for me, I was, if I'm drawing these comics and they're from Islamic history and tradition, it needs to carry that ambience for the reader. And that made me go more deeper into Islamic art because Islamic civilization is very rich in its art, very, very rich. It's often not talked about um, as much, but the more I went, I was like, oh, there is just so much in it, and it's so rich, and it's also such a spiritual practice, right? You know, I think something about the modern world has made art sort of an exclusive practice, and that it's for rich people, and it's something you do or look at and engage with in the museum. But that was not how traditional people saw art. It was a way of life. It was how you built your homes. It was how you built your vessels. It was how you made the carpets. It was how you pray. It was a way to connect with God. So it became very clear to me, that the books that I'm working on should have um, Islamic art or traditional art uh, part of the presentation. Um, and I think the two things that I looked at, focused more on was one was trying to see if I can bring some sort of miniature style um, drawings um, into the storytelling. Because if you look at Persian and Mughal miniatures and illustrations, they were part of books and they were actually part of the storytelling. So in a way, this is what I'm also doing with Sufi comics, storytelling through illustrations. So that was one thought, as how do I get that kind of feel into the book? And the other was calligraphy. In some ways, one of the more refined and higher forms of Islamic art.
Absolutely.
So we had a very talented calligraphist work on the
Oh,
uh,
wow.
verses.
Yeah. I mean, just look at the work. It's so beautiful. Um, and being a traditional artist myself, I was trained in illumination, manuscript work. Calligraphy is an ongoing struggle, but there was this idea to art where art is not in vain. There is some utilitarian, there's some purpose to art. We are not serving art, art is serving us. And I remember an incident from my teacher. She was our teacher for the art of illumination, which is particularly the embellishments that are done around the calligraphy. Her name is Farhunde, and she was visiting us here. We were engrossed in our work. We were painting, and we had 24 karat gold that we were using for painting, and it was very delicate and very precious work. And she said, I can see every one of you is so attached to your work. What if coffee were to spill on your work and it gets destroyed? And we were like, what is she saying? I mean, like, of course, we'll be so disappointed. We're putting our heart and soul into it. And she turned around and she said, do you think God has not produced enough beauty to make this world beautiful? His beauty is far more than what we can ever add to it. But remember that what you're engaging with, the production of this art, is not for you to beautify the world, but through it, beautify yourselves. And it's a message, it's a lesson that I've carried with me every single day after I heard it. It was so profound. Again, like you were saying, that first your idea was to give something to the world, and you thought you're making a change and you're making a difference in the world by giving it something. But in the end, we realized that whatever we do, the intention has to be about self purification, and it all comes back to the self.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Yeah, I'm just so intrigued, and I just more and more see myself as a student of art, um, a student of learning art and spirituality. I think one of the things that really hit me hard, and it just changed my view of art. You know, it's this saying, God is good, and He wants us to do good things. Yeah, He wants us to be good. Similarly, God is beautiful, and He wants us to create beautifully. And so interestingly, and I think you would know that the word goodness and beauty in Arabic are the same word.
Yes, Hassan,
Um,
Hussein,
Hassan and Hassan, yeah, from the
Ahsan.
same
Yeah.
Hassan. So, it's just beauty and goodness is just so interrelated to each other.
Yes.
And somehow, I think a lot of us have forgotten that. For me, it was almost a revelation when I kind of learned that.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
goes like this: Allahu Jamil wa yuhibbul Jamal.
Jamal,
It's a
yes,
hadith, yeah. And there's a verse in Surah Baqarah where Allah talks about this muhsin. Allah loves those who are muhsinin, the one who do good.
good, correct, right. Um, and uh, and if you kind of see also history in terms of what the art that the Muslims have created, it was uh, you know for the untrained eye or people who are not sort of attuned to this, it may look like, oh, this is luxury. But when you enter the space and when you see what they're doing, it's a totally different experience. And you can feel the sukoon and the sakina when you enter, say, a mosque that's done beautifully with sacred art. And or when you look at a calligraphy or when you look at these geometrical patterns, there's the sacred in us that comes alive when you see it. And it was that purpose through which they were creating that, to remind them of the sacred that within us. So when people go to a mosque, the whole ambience gives them the feeling of the awness of God when they're there. So it is art really to connect with God, and I think it's just so important in today's fast-paced, modern, utilitarian culture to bring art to remind us and to create spaces that we can connect with God.
Yeah, and I think it's so essential to focus on good. There's a saying which says, try to be an encourager. The world is already full of too many critical people. And I think this culture of saying that we need to focus on our problems to solve them, constantly talking about the negative. Even when I entered the professional arena of art, um, I wanted to join a mainstream program for fine art, but it just so happened I wasn't meant for it, and I went for my traditional Islamic art diploma. And later on, my peers, they said that with your own kind of spiritual inclination, you would not have liked the mainstream fine art program, because over there there's a lot of focus on the dark and the obscene, the problems of the world and all of that. And my aim was always to create art that brings beauty and joy and peace and stillness to the onlooker, to the spectator. And along the way, I realized that the pieces that I would create with a certain energy, the people who would see that art can feel it. They can feel the energy of the work. And sometimes, you get carried away. I also get carried away. I created a piece of work which was just specifically done for me to challenge myself and say, if everyone can do it, I can also do it. And I want to do it, within those strict boundaries. And it was rejected. They didn't let me put it for my exhibition. All of my other work was accepted except that one. I was so shocked to see that there was perfection of skill in that painting, but definitely my energy was missing. And so it was automatically dropped out of the show. So Eckhart Tolle says that the flower was perhaps the first creation of God that was not purely just a utilitarian thing of need. And he talks about it in the first few pages of his book, The New Earth, and he says that Jesus meditated on the flower and Buddha meditated on flower and they got enlightenment. And flower became, like you said, something that reminded them of the beauty within, something reminded them of the formless within us. Just like you were saying that the sacred outside activates the sacred inside.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's yes, thank you for sharing that and just connecting it all together. Um, yeah, it's just beautiful at so many levels.
Yeah, I think that when we talk about creativity, the whole idea of intention that you were talking about, we want to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and as a spiritual seeker, I think when we enter the arena of mysticism or mystical knowledge, automatically we see so much, um, so much in common with all the religions, like you were saying, being in India and observing this depth of soul. um, and I feel like in order to reach God, to feel God, I think there's a hadith which says, "Takhallaku bi akhlaqillah," adopt the akhlaq of God. And in adopting the akhlaq of God, we're trying to emulate the qualities of God. And being a creator is one of those really beautiful qualities of God, for which we recognize him. Okay, he's our khalik. And when we're in our creative mode, when we're painting or drawing or writing, or through poetry, I think it's a beautiful form of worship, because it's a way of emulating God and also praising God.
Yes. Um, yeah. Yeah, that was in a way, a revelation for me when um, I always loved art while growing up. I remember as a kid, I would get a lot of the projects the teacher would give me in terms of making the charts and putting it up on the walls. Um, but it was, um, I always grew up thinking, okay, this is, a utilitarian kind of thing to do. It was not, I did not see it in any way connecting with my faith, even though it's something I really enjoyed doing. Um, and I think much later, when I started Sufi comics, uh, I just realized, art is a spiritual practice. It's not just for elite, it's not just for talented people. It is an invitation to all to engage in. And I think the ultimate art or the ultimate thing that we have to do is the perfection of our soul, is to create and purify our soul. That is the ultimate goal of all art. And anything that you do to engage it, it becomes a form of art.
Beautiful, yes. Yeah, I mean, this is why I feel like even for me, it took many, many years to enter the field of becoming a professional artist, because I used to think of it as a hobby, and I used to think of it as a luxury, and I used to always look also like this idea that generally religion does not promote enjoyment. The religion of love and joy is very different from the religion of punishment and fear. And I think growing up, we grew up with a lot of that mentality that sacrifice in this world, live a difficult life in this world, hardships in this world mean good in the hereafter. Although now, with the mystical understanding with Sufism, I feel like our heaven and hell are right here. When we're angry, when we're jealous, we're burning in our own fire, and the stillness that we find, the joy that we find, the connection that we find in the still moments when we engage in art, or in any of these practices, I think they're remarkable. Sometimes they bring us insights and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala far deeper than a ritualistic practice can.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you think about it, how much time do our rituals take during the day, right? Maybe if you put it in total, half an hour, 1 hour, in total, uh, wajib rituals. But what about the rest of the time? Right? And especially in today's modern world where there's just so much of worldly activity happening, that it's full of forgetfulness of God. And that's all the more reason why art is not just a luxury, but it's a necessity for people practicing their faith so that they create these spaces or they engage in activities that becomes reminders. And that can be done at your home, it can be done at the workspace, it can be done in terms of just how you do your things, how you keep things around, what you put on your walls, what reminds you of the sacred. Um, it's not just calligraphy or uh, painting, but even the recitation of the Quran, the recitation of du'as, the zikr that we do, the way we dress, all that is art, reminds us of the
Beautiful.
sacred.
Yeah, it's a way of life. It's a deen. It's beautiful because recently in our tafsir class we were doing Ayatul Kursi, and where it said like Rahafiddin, there is no compulsion in deen. Sheikh Fadlallah Hairi had translated it as there is no compulsion in life transaction. And then he goes on to explain how we all choose a particular way of life, and what is good, what is ahsan, will appeal to the heart. So there is no compulsion. It will automatically touch the heart, and that's what I feel is the attraction to worship, or to beautiful spaces of worship like mosques, churches, temples, that they're filled with so much holy sacredness, that holiness makes us feel more whole, you know um and yeah, and I think that it's really, really remarkable to connect the spiritual, the inner with the outer, and come into a place of coherence, and again, making it whole, instead of bifurcating it. So now I would like to request you to read to us something which is your favorite part of any of your books.
Yeah. Um, Actually, recently I have been thinking about one of the comics that I drew in the first book. So I thought that would be a good one to read. It's called The Power of Prayers. Um, so let me just go to that page and read it out.
So I
So
got
at least
got my version of this book, I think in 2011.
Yeah,
But Brother Ali has now done it,
updated it.
updated it, and edited it, and now it's colorful. I have the black and white one, so now I think you have to get me the colored version too.
I'll get you the color version. I
Thank
think my
you.
thing is kind of
Okay.
blurred, but
Yeah.
I think you can open up. It's over here, page 47. I'm not sure what page is it in the earlier edition,
Okay.
but it says the power of prayers.
Yes, it's the same page. Yes.
Is the same page? Okay, great. So I'll go ahead and read it out. So in the first scene, you have three people sitting on a table, um, and a wealthy merchant invited a Sufi sheikh and a doctor for dinner. So the three of them are sitting and they're having dinner. And the merchant, who's the host, he says, "Oh sheikh, I feel grief because my daughter has fallen seriously ill. Would you please recite some prayers for her?" So the sheikh, is feeling sad that his daughter isn't feeling well. So he responds, "My friend, I will recite the holy names of God, which will cure her." And the doctor who's listening all this, he starts laughing out loud, and he says, "Ha ha, what nonsense. With today's scientific progress of healing, these old-fashioned ways are holding back progress." Now, this is what the Sufi Sheikh responds with. He says, "You donkey, what do you know about the power of prayers?" Right? So you get this strong reaction from the sheikh, and now the doctor is kind of taken aback, and he's also now really upset, and he's getting red, and he's getting angry, and his kind of glasses are kind of down, and he's looking at the sheikh, and he's saying, "How dare you call me such names? I know, you can imagine a respectable place. The host is there, and the sheikh is calling the doctor a donkey. Now, this is what the sheikh responds. He says, "Please forgive me. But if the word donkey can turn your face red, it can dilate your blood vessels, it can make your heart beat faster, it can boost your adrenaline level. Surely then it's not nonsense to believe that the name of our Creator can have a healing effect."
Wow, subhanallah.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
so many other gems like this. Thank you. So, why this particular one?
You know, I just like the doctor, I had these doubts in my mind. Like, my mom, when she would give me medicine, she would say, "Yeah, Shafi, yeah, Shafi," and she would like, give me the medicine. So she'd take the name, she wouldn't ignore the medicine, but she would take the names of God, and she would like, give me the medicine. And I was like, the medicine is curing me. Like, what this is, yeah, Shafi, I don't get it. um, so there's something about this story that hits home because it's so true. It's clearly so demonstrating. Like the word donkey, just said donkey, and we've
Yeah.
all been there. We've all been insulted some way or the other, right? And we
Yeah.
know how it feels, and it has a visceral effect in our body. It's not
Ah,
just
we get
mental.
triggered all the time, and it's words that
Yeah,
trigger us. So, yeah,
and
for
it was a
sure.
trigger. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, please go on.
yeah, so it's just that now I don't have that doubt anymore when it's just so clear to me that how words can have an effect on our body and on our souls.
So, I think I benefited a lot from your books all throughout these years as a religious speaker, especially for children. My children were growing up. I would take these books with me and read these out to them, and kids used to be really intrigued. Um, and I think that it was really amazing to present such deep messages in such a beautiful, warm way where there was illustration and all of that, and then I would connect it to scientific information as well. And I remember telling this story from this book and then connecting it to Dr. Masaru Emoto's research on the messages of water, where he talks about how different words would change the molecular makeup of water. And good words would create crystals like snowflakes, and bad words would create really dirty molecular formations. So yeah, we are also 70 to 80% water, if not 90%, and the words are constantly having that effect on us. So it's a beautiful story, and I love how after every story there is a connection to the Quran, and then the Hadith to further expound, and then there are reflections about the story you've presented. One question that popped into my mind while you were telling us this story is that how did you deal with drawing figures as part of Islamic work? Because traditionally in Islam, we don't encourage making figures of people.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's true. It's not encouraged. In Islamic art, there is no sculpture. There is no, you go to the holy places. This that outer form is absent, and it was never any form of higher art in Islam to to replicate the human form. Islam that way is very abstract in its art. Mm, However, there was a minor art of illustrations, and even if you read scientific texts of early Islamic civilization, they would draw people for the purpose of understanding the human body, for the purpose of telling a story, or the purpose of illustrating a poem. And they were very stylized, and they were miniature also, to inform that they were like small for the book. They were never you know uh, made huge or made as sculptures. So to that extent, my own study I sensed that uh, there is a space for it, but it's limited. It's limited to book illustrations. I think within that, Islamic civilization has done, for the purpose of stories, have illustrated. So I kind of felt safe doing it. I felt I was not kind of crossing any boundaries. Of course, there were now then the question of how would you draw holy personalities? Um, and typically, what I've seen is for the holy personalities, you avoid drawing the face, and you'd often, like if you see miniature painting, they would have a curtain on the face, or they would have some light where the face is drawn or the face is present. So I would do that. I had an interesting angle which I got inspired from the movie The Message. Notice in the movie, uh, when there's a part where the prophet is involved.
Just a
The
second, my computer's charger is not plugged in, so we'll just repeat
Sure,
that. Just a second.
yeah,
Sorry about that. Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so you can
Um,
start again.
I will start from I was talking about the prophet. I think that yeah. So
Message.
yeah. So I had one story that is a story of the prophet in the first book, Sufi comics. And I was like, how it's a very powerful story, and like I want to include it, but how do I do it? I can't draw the prophet. And I was just inspired the way the story of the prophet was portrayed in the movie The Message. And the director did something very interesting where when the prophet was involved, he would take the viewer as if he's looking through the eyes of the prophet, right? So
Mm.
like if Hazrat Hamza is talking to the prophet, it's like he's talking to the camera, and he this very artfully, so you kind of know that this is the prophet. And because when he's turning his head away, they come back and they try to get back his attention, to come back to the camera. And that's the same technique I used when doing the story of the prophet. So it's like the reader through the eyes of the prophet, he's having a conversation with the other person.
Brilliant.
Um,
So it's
yeah.
like life is constantly inspiring us and teaching us. And I mean, it became a part of how you expressed yourself. So we're constantly picking these cues and signs from everywhere. Beautiful.
Yeah, I think um, y- there is a way that the Muslim community have been able to respect the tradition, at the same time serve the needs of the people, because a lot of us are visual thinkers. All of us are, to some extent, are, and there is also a need, and God has created that within us. So there is a way to still practice the art and present information while still respecting tradition.
So I also have a question. I perhaps it's not completely in line with the discussion we were having now. But the discussion is that why why propagate a religious message? Why not make it secular? I'm being a devil's advocate here because I get asked that a lot. Because the secular way of talking about faith and the universe and the energy, it's become really popular. A lot more people feel like you can unite on that way of expressing devotion. What are your thoughts about that?
I think religion is a reality, and whether it's Islam, whether it's Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, it is a reality and the reality is that majority of the world population are following some religion, right? So there is no reason to kind of shove it on the carpet or hide it. I think the discomfort people have is often religion is presented in a black and white way. and it's like my way or the highway. It's like I'm right, you're wrong, and that's where the discomfort comes in. So instead of presenting a religion that way, why not just not talk about it and just talk about the common nice things without taking names? But the more I understand the religion, the more I see that at the esoteric level, all the religions have a very common message, and therefore, uh, especially in today's world where there's so much misinformation, it's all the more important and critical to present religion in a way that people of other faiths can also understand. That was one of the reasons also why I started this book, or created Sufi comics. So it is deliberate uh, to talk about religion. One is because I'm being a Muslim and taking my faith seriously. Um, I wanted to remove misconceptions and I want to build bridges with other faiths. Um, I think if we look at a world ahead, you know, are we always going to fight with people of other faiths? Right? We need to, for our children and our children's children and our future generations, we need to have a world where all faiths recognize the beauty in each other and work together.
Beautiful. So it reminds me of a hadith of Hazrat Ali alayhi salam from a beautiful book by Mullah Sadruddin Shirazi, The Hermeneutics of the Light Verse. And the hadith, I'm paraphrasing, goes something like, if you want to find unity and peace, you'll have to go under the surface. You'll have to go into the deeper knowledge. And that is what I believe esoteric, mystical, Sufi information or Sufi way of understanding Islam can do for us, that it can connect us to something which is an underlying network. Just like body is a reality, the soul is also a reality which all of us experience. We experience the dream world, we experience all these experiences which are common to all of humanity. And when we go deeper, recently I've become really obsessed with this verse of the Quran, in Surah Yunus. I think it's verse number 37, 10th Surah, verse number 37. And it says that this Quran has come as a confirmation of the scriptures before it. And there is no doubt in the truth of it. And what I found so beautiful is that a lot of times my questions that would emerge out of Quran, I would find answers to those questions in something in the Bible, some lecture from a pastor. I was reading a book on Kundalini yoga and I found an answer over there. And it suddenly occurred to me that the reason as Muslims, growing up in the madrasa, we were required to learn this, that we cannot be Muslims without believing in all 124,000 prophets and their books. And we had to learn the names of the big, the important books and the names of the prophets. And what occurred to me is that if we want to truly understand this book, Quran, as a Muslim, being the final religion, we won't find our answers if we don't go through previous scriptures and we don't connect to the entire lineage and the whole trajectory of the Prophet, starting from Hazrat Adam. And that's why I think what you're saying is so, it resonates with me and so many of us who are now tired of a fighting world, a world who is sick of being sick, a world that now wants, not right and wrong perhaps, but but a solution which can be a kind, which can be something kind, and it doesn't necessarily have to be right and wrong, black and white, but just something that falls into that gray area of being kind.
Yeah, yeah, kind, and I think the word that comes to mind is understanding. I think it's just so quick. Often we're so quick to judge without really understanding. And I think for me, the experience of especially coming to India, that and knowing and seeing how deeply spiritual it is, that when you meet people of other faiths, you just cannot deny the spirituality in them. I mean, when you meet someone who's um, whether a Christian or a Hindu, and they take this religion seriously, and you talk to them and you say, well, this he is clearly he has some level of enlightenment. Otherwise, he wouldn't be speaking this way. He wouldn't be behaving this way. You meet amazing people, and they belong to a completely different faith. And you're if someone with an exclusivist view, you just can't hold that and be honest to yourself. It just doesn't fit. And therefore, all the more reason in today's globalized world, there's a need to build bridges and connect and really understand, not to rebut or to kind of prove anybody wrong, but to really understand in their own terms what is the other person's perspective and what is it that makes them spiritual. And I think we just find that we're not so different in so many ways.
Yeah, and I think art is a language that we all understand, and it is one of those common denominators which we can all relate to and understand. And yeah, absolutely about, talking, understanding, building bridges. So recently I had the opportunity of talking to a Zoroastrian priestess, and in the Muslim community, a lot of times, they're dismissed as the fire worshippers and misconceptions, which what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go to the horse's mouth and get the right information. And it was so interesting that she sent me names of God, and guess how many names they have, the prominent names of God? They have 101 names, just like we have 100 names, right? So it was so remarkable. They also use a rosary, a tasbih like we use. And I just want to read out, one of the names, one or two of the names that she sent me. And I was like, how is it any different from us? One without a beginning, one without an end, source of all creations, purest of pure, one and only. So I was just going through them and I was like, wow, they're also monotheistic and they're also believing in the same God I'm believing in. And all the names of God and the meanings, they're so aligned with what we do. It's just that, ours ours is in a garb called Islam, and theirs is in a garb called Zoroastrianism. But in the end, that's where the esoteric knowledge takes us, the names of God, the goodness of character, nobility of human refined character, they all come to that one source and one beginning.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I didn't know about Zoroastrianism and the names, so this is new for me. Um, I had something similar experience. If you read the Upanishads and the Vedas, and if you have the English translation in front, and let's say you have the Najul Balaga or Saif-e-Sajadiya, and you have the English translation, you will not know the difference. You kind of like,
Wow.
they all kind of look the same, and they all saying the same thing.
Beautiful.
Um, so it's true that all the great religions, they connect at the esoteric level.
Beautiful. It's like we all look different, but we all have the same blood running through our veins, you know?
Yeah, literally we are. And also what I mentioned this in my latest book, and I think what became clear to me is that the diversity of religion is not a mistake. It's not like, oh, God likes this, one religion, and these unfortunately misguided kind of people are now somewhere else. It was by design. I mean, and therefore there is wisdom in that diversity. And one of the names of God is, I think, diversity. I'm not getting exact word, but there is one of the names of God. So it is an expression of His name that we are seeing, and there is wisdom in that. And so it just requires humility on our side to kind of see that unity in diversity.
Yeah, it is. Like you said, it is by design. And, in the Quran, Allah says that not a leaf falls, but that I'm aware of it. It's all with His permission. And in the Quran, Allah says that if I wanted, I would have created you on one religion, but I created you nations and tribes so that you may know one another. And this is what Rumi says. In one of the passages I was reading, he says, God, what was the purpose of putting us in this world and then calling us back to the same? Like where we come from is where we return. What was the purpose of this experience? And then Rumi answers his own question and he says that it is when you are bereaved from your beloved and you feel the sweetness of that distance. And then when you reunite, there's an emotion that you feel that you couldn't have felt otherwise. And Ibn Sina, in his treatise on joy and happiness, says the same thing. He says you can taste sweetness and you can yearn for a joy only when you've already tasted it once. So I think, in that sense, we're all yearning for that unity, for that oneness, for that peace, um, uh, through the diversity. There is a unity in our diversity, not a single fingerprint matches another fingerprint, and yet we all have fingerprints and we all have fingers. So there's this unity in our diversity. Each one of us is alone, and yet in our loneliness we are united. Thank you so much, Brother Ali, for joining us from India, Bangalore. And I'm here sitting in Karachi, Pakistan. And I think that in itself is a big achievement for us to talk and communicate, and perhaps a beginning of bigger things. Would you like to say any parting words before we end this beautiful talk?
Oh, well, thank you for this interview. I think I touched upon topics and said things that I normally haven't shared before. So I hope your readers um, enjoy. I have, I'm planning for more books and some very interesting projects, and collaborating with more people. So inshallah, um, I hope to share that soon and with your audience as well. Um, so SufiComics.com is a nice place to kind of check out what I'll be working on.
Amazing. Thank you so much. That is so exciting. And we look forward to more of your projects, collaborations. Guys, check out Sufi Comics on Instagram. Their website is amazing. Get their books. They're available on Amazon and various different portals online. And if anybody's having trouble, just ask me. I can share the links with you guys. And just like me, I have all of their books, and I'm hoping to finish having the entire collection very soon. So once you get hooked onto these, really there's no end, and that's why I think you gotta keep making more. Thank you.
Inshallah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Take
Welcome.
care. Have a lovely day. Khuda
Okay.
Hafiz.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz.